Hello and welcome to today's FortiNDR Info Byte. My name is Venu and I'm a pre-sales engineer at Wavelength. I've been in the industry for a little over 9 years and my role is to predominantly put together solutions with our customers, with our partners to protect customer environments. We're very lucky to have Daniel Polidori, who's Fortinet's consulting systems engineer. He's got a wealth of experience. Daniel's one of those specialists who work together with the FortiNDR product development team. He's here to talk about some of the cool things that FortiNDR can offer for you. Our agenda for today's Info Byte is, first, we're going to look at current and evolving landscape affecting security operations. Then we're going to look at an introduction to FortiNDR. What is FortiNDR? Then we're going to explore some of the features that it has. Things like proactive threat detection, enhanced visibility, automation and some efficiency, compliance and reporting. And then Daniel's got a very good FortiNDR demo. Then finally, you can find more information and where to find it. Explore some of the security operation challenges today. So market trends indicate evolving cyber threat landscape is a massive concern. Cyber attacks are advancing with technologies. So with things like AI, you can launch attacks with very minimal effects. So the next challenge is expanding digital attack surface, which is bringing in work from anywhere policies to more connected devices from OT, IoTs on the rise as well. Also adding cloud applications and hybrid cloud environments, making it a lot more challenging as well. There's a massive cybersecurity skill shortage. So this brings in the challenge of not being able to identify and respond to threats as they arise as well. The last part is cybersecurity complexity. So we talked about the ever-expanding digital attack surface. To protect this expanding digital attack surface, you need to bring in more tools. Managing a wide range of security tools complicates threat detection. Alert fatigues or not having a simplified unified management console, making it a lot more challenging as well. So what are our prospects saying about security? So 52% find it a lot more challenging than what they saw 2 years ago. 41% saying rapidly evolving threat landscapes is challenging. 39% indicating attack surface is constantly changing and evolving with things like AI. 37% highlight the volume and complexity of the alert have also increased. So this is where they need highly skilled people. Consolidation to reduce risk. So if you look at some data from 2020 to 2022, it's all changed quite a lot. So if you look at the top part where it's in dark blue, 20% of customers didn't really look at a consolidation strategy. But if you look at in 2022, it's reduced to just 3%. So from 2020, customers who thought about a consolidation strategy has increased from 29% to 75%. So that's a phenomenal growth. And if you look at primary reasons why organizations are choosing, 65% wants to reduce their risk posture. 59% wants to improve their security capabilities. 42% wants to fit a vendor strategy within their organization. And lastly, 36% wants flat or reduce security staffing or security teams. SOC teams need tools for thorough investigations. So if you look at some of the data from here, on average, it takes 281 days to identify and contain a data breach. So this is data from 2023. 69% of SOC analysts cite the lack of visibility into network traffic is one of the top reasons why SOC is not effective. 84% of SOC analysts rank minimalization or seeing false positive as the most important SOC activity. 52% cite they need some simplified help or simplified playbooks or rules that's out of the box and available to be deployed. So next up, we're going to be looking at FortiNDR, and for that, I might hand over to Daniel Polidori. Dan, over to you.
Thanks so much, Vinu. That was a really good information. So as Vinu said, I'm Dan Polidori, been with FortiNet now for about 6 years, been in the industry for quite a while as well. So I'm going to take you through FortiNDR in a little bit more detail. We'll cover off a few additional things like, I guess, SOC and a few things. Vinu's already gone over the agenda, but with that being said, let's just jump straight into it. So very quickly, what is NDR and what is its value, right? Because I mean, it's okay to say that, yep, I've got a product called NDR and I think that you should use it, but I'm a big believer in the why. I really like to try and touch on that. So you sort of like hear about these products today. You've got NDR, you've got EDR, you've got XDR, MDR, right? There's all these DR products, and it's funny, in all these products, the DR always stands for the same thing: detection and response. And really, when you think about what value do they add, so EDR is a very hot topic at the moment, and EDR has been around now for quite a while. And really, the value that EDR adds is it basically it's installed on your endpoint, and it will give you visibility of the endpoints that it's been installed onto. And therein lies the problem, right? EDR is an endpoint protection product, and it's only going to see it's only going to give you visibility, around what it can actually be installed onto. So if you think about all those legacy systems that are out in the world, old environments, legacy environments that require air gapping of some sort, you're not going to get visibility into those environments by using an EDR product. And realistically, that's where something like an NDR comes into play. The N in NDR stands for network, right? It's network detection and response. And if you think about your network sees everything. Everything has to pass through the network. So the benefit we have there is if we can actually sniff the network traffic, and if we have a way of analyzing that traffic in some way, that's going to put you in a much better position to potentially catch or see malicious activity within your environment, even potentially see a 0-day within your environment before it has the ability to start doing anything malicious. I mean, Vinu already touched as well on the days to identify a breach, and that number's actually changed slightly. So I think he had it at 277, and that average has now gone up to 280. So that in itself is scary. You could have someone sitting in your environment for 280 days before you actually detect. That's nearly 1 year, right? So it's definitely something that we need to try to fix, and how we do that is definitely with things like NDR in an environment, because it's going to give you a lot more visibility. So again, very quickly, just sort of touching on NDR and these other detection technologies. We think about things like next-gen firewalls, right? So we all know what they are. They've been around for years, but really they're a firewall. Yes, they've got IPS signatures, you've got app control built into these firewalls these days and all that sort of stuff. But a firewall is only going to see basic information from the packet. A firewall is never going to look at metadata. And really, that's what's important. You don't want to just look at, say, header information. You want to actually look within, like inside the packet, inside the encapsulated packet. I spoke about endpoint before. So endpoint protection can come in the form of EDR or EPP, endpoint protection, right? That's generally what you sort of call antivirus solutions these days. But again, it's endpoint only. So it's only going to see what it can actually be installed onto. Sandboxing. I guess we did a webinar on sandboxing a couple of weeks ago now. Not that I'm saying sandboxing is not required, but it's a different type of technology. Sandboxing is more around having a file sent to the sandbox so that it can be detonated within like a confined environment, right? A safe environment. Whereas with NDR, there is a little bit of crossover. Yes, NDR can do something with files as well, but it does it in a very different way. And it doesn't have to actually detonate the file in an environment to understand what's going on. We also talk about deception technology as well. So, you know, deception technology is amazing. Yes, you can deploy it, use it as a decoy. But the one thing that I think you've seen with all of these solutions that I've just spoken about, they're really all about the detection. You know, there's no real sort of there's no real response in there, and that's something I think that you know, we need to sort of focus on a little bit more when it comes to, you know, NDR being able to, as I said before, go deeper into you know, from a visibility perspective, right? You can see there the main focus of NDR is to focus on the network metadata, looking at things like protocols, access. You know, could be looking at host names, like URL strings, HTTP strings within the packets, pulling all that information out of the packets, and then analyzing that information in some way. So today we are going to be speaking about on-premise deployments, right? So we do have two, I guess, types of NDR. We've got FortiNDR on-premise. We've also got FortiNDR cloud. It really depends on the deployment method that you require, right, for your environment. So I won't touch on cloud today. The one thing I will say just with cloud is one of the big game changes that we have is, as you can see, in our SaaS deployment of FortiNDR Cloud, we can actually do a retention of up to 365 days. Now, if you think about those dwell times being at, say, 280 days, if we're giving you retention of 365, we're giving you a year's worth of retention. So if something does happen in your environment, you're going to be able to go back in history 1 year to actually understand what was happening within your environment. Where did it start? What was the first host? You know, how did it move? Did it move laterally? Right, you're going to be able to sort of dig out all that information. But as I said, today we're focusing on the on-premise deployment. All right, so from an on-prem perspective, the big key benefits is that it's definitely suitable for things like OT environments or air-gapped environments or large SOC environments. The deployment method of the NDR on-prem is we do a standalone mode. So if it's just one device, you can just manage that one device in standalone mode. Or alternatively, we can do what we call our center sensor deployment mode as well, where you deploy one box as a center, and that becomes the central manager for all of the sensors that you would deploy. So obviously the sensors is what would actually take the sniff ports from the network, and it would then send all of that information up into the center, and the center would become your single pane of glass, if you will. Retention, as you can see there, is disk dependent. So the disks can be expanded, right, through SKUs at ordering time or later. But it is important to note that when you have to do that, obviously you're going to wipe the disks. So you do want to try to plan for the amount of retention that you want up front. The integration as well. So we'll touch on this a little bit later, but integrations are, there's native integrations basically within the Fortinet fabric. Okay, so as I said, we'll touch on those later. And we also support things like NetFlows, AD as well. So we can tie hosts that we detect through the sniffed traffic back to Active Directory, and we also support OT protocols as well in the in one of the later releases. All right, and the ANN, I will touch on that a little bit later as well. That is one of the engines, one of the AI engines that exists within the FortiNDR, and that stands for the Artificial Neural Network, and that really plays a massive role in how we are able to analyze files. And again, I will touch on that a little bit later on. So I think to start off real quick as well, just to touch on the SOC, because you know, Vinu spoke a lot about you know, I guess the skill shortages, right, that exist in the market. It's very hard to find good people and actually get bums on seats to, you know, to basically analyze all this data that's coming in. So, I mean, SIEMs have been around for a very long time, and SIEMs are an amazing tool, but the problem with the SIEM is you still need someone driving that seam. You still need someone to actually do something with all the data that's coming in. It will correlate, yes, but you still then need to kind of go, well, what is that? That looks bad. What am I going to do with that? If you want any automation, you've got to go through and build that out. And this is where endpoint detection and response, or EDR, they did help quite a bit, right, when it comes to seams, because EDR is at the endpoint. So generally, when you have someone malicious that's going to come into the environment, they're eventually going to land somewhere on an endpoint and try to move laterally from that endpoint. So the hope is that the EDR will actually detect that behavior, and the EDRs are looking for behaviors. So therefore, in theory, it should see those behaviors and it should block or stop that from actually happening. So thereby, yes, logs will still go to the seam, but no one actually has to sort of do anything from a response perspective, right? The response is really to go and investigate after the fact, because the EDR has caught that and stopped it. But realistically, to get full SOC visibility, what we really want is you want EDR that's going to handle your endpoints. So potentially your Windows fleet, Mac OS, and say Unix or Linux fleet. But then the NDR is really going to come in and start looking at everything else on the network. And that's really what's going to give you that full SOC visibility. Okay, so just to round out the why network detection and response. And I think that really comes down to these 3 points. Sophisticated threats. Venu spoke about that already. And when you look at the fact that attackers can hide in network traffic, and not only can they hide in network traffic, but look at how long, or the duration that they can actually hide in that traffic. That's quite scary, especially the hiding in network traffic. If you think about what an NDR is going to do, is it's looking at that network traffic. And not only is it looking at network traffic, but it's looking at the raw traffic, basically from a spam port. So therefore, it's going to effectively see everything that's traversing the network. You can choose at what point you want to tap the network. It could be at the core layer, it could be further up the chain, whatever it might be. But when NDR is seeing all of that information, seeing all of that metadata, and then taking all that metadata in, it's basically seeing a lot more than, say, what just your EDR is seeing at the endpoint. The visibility gaps across the network, right? That is also huge, and that's also where an NDR is going to assist, right? When we talk about visibility gaps, it goes back to an EDR is on an endpoint. You might have some sort of, like, whatever your mail gateway is, right? But there's always going to be points where you're going to have gaps in that, in that network. And really, again, I know I keep going back to the N in NDR, but NDR is looking at the network. So it's seeing all of the traffic that's traversing your network. The other benefit we have as well is things like OT environments. Generally, they're segregated environments. They're pushed off to the side. They're on a massive flat VLAN or a flat network. A lot of the switches in those environments are old, legacy, unmanaged, right? So really, it's very hard to pull information out of those environments. And also, people generally don't want anything sitting in line to those environments because they don't want to cause any issues with those environments. NDR sits off to the side and basically takes a spam port. So as long as you can at least just get mirror traffic coming out of those environments and get that to NDR, then it's going to be able to help detect things within those environments or anything malicious. And as I've been saying as well, through all this, I talk about the network, the increased volume of network data. I mean, the amount of data that's basically coming out of the network, if you were to just try to pump all of that into a scene or something along those lines, you're still going to need someone to sit there and actually come up with what do I do with all this data? Like, I've got to correlate it, I've got to do something with it. And that's where it starts to become a really big problem. And once you through the demo, you'll see the NDR GUI. You'll see how NDR organizes the data as well, and I think you'll see that how I think you'll actually see how it could help within, say, your SOC or within your environment. Okay, so we've covered off the why FortiNDR. So now let's try and do a bit of a deep dive into FortiNDR. You know, around its deployment, the integrations, some of the engines that exist in there, just so you guys can get a bit of a feel and understanding for the product itself. So remember here, I'm talking about the on-premise deployment as well. All right, so the air gap component, I think, is a nice to have with the product. The fact that it can be deployed in an air gapped environment. So, you know, if you think about the likes of OT environments, that's where it can be used, but it can also be used in non-air gap environments is effectively what I'm trying to say. So if you think about your left-hand side there, you've got a branch, you've got a HQ, and then you've got other different types of networks. So from an NDR perspective, the span port, or taking a span port from a switch, that can be from any type of switch. It doesn't matter if it's a Fortinet switch, it could be an Aruba switch, Cisco, right? It doesn't matter. As long as it's a span port and you're sending that traffic across. Where you really start to get the value of NDR is when you start thinking about the integrations that you can do with our platform approach. So obviously FortiSwitch and FortiGate. So with a FortiGate, you can actually do inline blocking with NDR with a file. So by assigning an AV profile to a security policy, the file, if suspicious, you can actually send that file to FortiNDR, and then FortiNDR will then send back a verdict whether it's okay or not okay. On top of that, from other networks perspective, as you can see there, file submission, we have integration with FortiSandbox, FortiMail, and there's a couple of FortiEDR as well. So there's a couple of other products that we do integrate with as well. If we move over to the right-hand side, obviously you've got that fabric response, and that's what I was talking about there. So if NDR does see anything malicious from one of the sensors that's coming in, then those will act as a trigger to then go and trigger one of those responses. Now, those responses could be something simple, like from a FortiGate perspective, you might want to block a host. From a FortiNAC perspective, you might go and say, go and quarantine the host, and that's the same with FortiSwitch. You can do a quarantine, or you can just make use of FortiAnalyzer, FortiSIEM, or FortiSOAR. But the SIEM and the SOAR, that's fairly generic, if that makes sense, right? So you could do that with any sort of SIEM or SOAR that's out there. And then down the bottom there, we have that enrichment of data. So I haven't touched on FortiGuard Labs. I guess I just made this assumption that everyone would know what FortiGuard Labs is, but very quickly, FortiGuard Labs was created back when Fortinet started in the year 2000. And FortiGuard Labs really has grown now, and it effectively underpins all of our products, right? So from AV engines, all of our database updates, IPS signatures, everything comes from FortiGuard Labs. So as you can see there, we are taking in a whole bunch of databases from our very own FortiGuard Labs, AD integration as well. So once traffic is sniffed and learned through the AD integration process, we can actually identify if a host is part of a domain, and then we'll actually bring that domain name in. So we'll, pop that in there instead of the IP address. Again, it's just more visibility for you. We have added things like NetFlow into the environment, so we can actually take NetFlows. The AV and the ANN engines as well. So you've got the antivirus engine as well as the artificial neural network engine. So they're just different types of AI engines that are basically running within NDR. And we've also added in that OT IPS app control, which really came from the FortiGate as well. So it's the same database as the FortiGate users. We've now basically put that into FortiNDR. And when we look at FortiNDR as well, it's the virtual security analyst. So that's probably one of the biggest advantages, I think, in NDR is the VSA. And that's exactly what that is, right? It's effectively, I'm not going to say NDR replacing bums on seats, because that's not what it's there to do. It's basically there to try to help your SOC scale. And as Venu spoke about before, the skill shortage that is out there is real. It's hard to find people who actually know how to analyze all of this data and do something with that. And if the virtual security analyst can help from that perspective, then it's definitely worth having a look at that as well. So I think I spoke a lot about the kill chain in the sandbox session that we did a couple of weeks back. And the kill chain is used very heavily in the cybersecurity industry. You look at it from the left, from reconnaissance, you go all the way to obviously objectives on the right-hand side. And really what the aim here is to try to stop malicious actors as early in the kill chain as possible. Right, that's effectively what we're trying to do. So you're looking at the bottom there, you've got IPS, you've got phishing attacks, potentially malicious web traffic, right? You've got all of these things that could potentially be happening in your environment. And there's things on your network that could be helping these malicious actors, like weak ciphers, right? So that's a pretty massive one. And NDR is going to help you detect those weak ciphers within your environment. You've got malware detection as well. So you can see there, that's based on AV and the ANN. And remember, that's an AI engine that's running within NDR. Sorry, excuse my voice. And that's going to help you detect and classify malware, and potentially trace the source as well. Oops, so sorry, missed a slide. Okay, so what makes our NDR unique? And I think the biggest thing that makes our NDR unique is the fact that it makes the use of so much metadata from the network. Ingesting all the metadata from the network layer is really what gives NDR full visibility. I know I keep harping on about visibility, but really that's what it's about. You can't stop what you can't see. It's that simple. Firewalls are great at what they do, but firewalls look at header information. They don't acquire or dive into the metadata within the packets. They'll give you information like source IP, destination IP, source and destination ports, right? But that's all really basic information. And even then, a firewall is going to look at that. And yes, it might be able to look at, say, a malicious IOC, but we need more than that. We have to go deeper. So the purpose of the metadata is really allowing FortiNDR full visibility into the network traffic. It's going to see protocols like HTTP, SMB, DNS, and seeing those protocols, that's really what I would sort of consider the first layer. It's great that it can see those protocols, but again, we want to go deeper. We want to go further. When you look at the different layers in the network, the TCP/IP stack, you got layers 1 through to 7. Your protocol stops at layer 4. So what about the rest of 4, 5, 6, and 7? So an example of that might be something like a file that's being transferred. Now, when a file is transferred, file could be transferred using SMB, FTP, or the file could even be hidden in, say, like a HTTP or a DNS request. Now, because FortiNDR is actually receiving all of the, receiving everything from the network, NDR is not only going to see the file being transferred, but it's also going to be able to see within the, let's just say it's a DNS, the DNS protocol is being used, or it's HTTP, it's going to see inside there, it's going to see the file, and then inside the file is also metadata. And that's what NDR is going to actually go into that file. It's going to pull out that metadata, and it's going to be able to use that, analyze it, and then use that metadata to make a decision. Now, we should also talk about encrypted traffic. Obviously, if traffic is encrypted, then that is going to cause a problem, because if traffic is encrypted, then there's no way that NDR can actually see that encrypted traffic, because FortiNDR does not have a decryption engine built into it. Now, it does have the ability to use JA3 hashes or JA3 signatures. And effectively, a JA3 hash is a fingerprint which has been generated using specific values that are found in the SSL/TLS handshake process. So after it gets these values out of the out of that handshake, it effectively concatenates these values together, and a JA3 fingerprint is generated, an MD5 hash is generated, and then that is what basically makes up the JA3 signature. And these signatures are shared with other like cybersecurity vendors as well. Now, if encrypted traffic comes through and we can see that JA3 signature matches that particular packet that's coming through, then obviously, yes, it's encrypted, but remember, we're looking at the SSL TLS handshake. So we're not actually having a look at the traffic at that point in time. So we're able to match using those JA3 hashes. But if you want to be able to analyze encrypted traffic, then before the traffic gets sent to FortiNDR, you want to decrypt that traffic. Now, there's a few different ways that you can actually do that, and one of the best ways is to use something like a packet broker. A packet broker is something that can decrypt the traffic, and then as the traffic passes through the packet broker, it'll decrypt it, and then it'll take that traffic and send it off to FortiNDR for analysis. So some packet brokers that are out there, one of them is Garland Technology. So Garland Technology have got some great packet brokers on the market. And not only do they do things like decryption, but they also do deduplication, and they can do packet slicing and timestamping as well. So without sort of veering from what we're supposed to be talking about and going into packet brokers, but the deduplication is also something that should be considered in large environments, because you could be taking sources, right, sniff ports from multiple locations in your network, and if you're sending all of that to the FortiNDR, if those packets are duplicated, then you're effectively going to be pumping duplicated packets into NDR. Whereas if you pass it through a packet broker, it'll dedupe and potentially decrypt if you want to do that as well, and then send it off to FortiNDR for analysis. Okay, so I've spoken about AI a little bit, and I'll touch on that again with another slide a little bit further in. But the ML, or the machine learning, is again something that's very how do I say? I just don't want to say, like, not that I'm saying other vendors can't, but the way that we do things is slightly different. And what I mean by that is we have the ability to, once you deploy FortiNDR into an environment, what FortiNDR wants to do is it wants to build a baseline. And to build that baseline, you effectively go off and configure what we call a profile. Now, that profile can be changed. So as you can see there, you've got protocols and different behaviors, different IPs and ports. So you could say you want to look at, say, source port and destination port, or for some reason, you might only want to look at, say, a destination port in this particular profile. And the profiles are bound to the sensors as well. And once the profile is created, anything outside of that profile is effectively seen as an anomaly, right? So I'll try to break that down a little bit more. If you deploy FortiNDR into an environment, you would generally run a baseline, I would say, for a minimum of 7 days. So you got 7 days where FortiNDR is going to be baselining your network. Now, if you have a job that runs only every 2 weeks, and that job was the next week, not the 7 days that you just baselined, then when that job ran in that week, the second week, that would appear in FortiNDR as an anomaly. So that would be something that would pop up, and you would then have to go and have a look at that. So it's very hard to explain the baseline. Like, you kind of see that in the demo that I do, but time is always an issue. So, but I hope that you can understand, I guess, how amazing the baseline component is and what that actually does and how that can benefit you in an environment, right? Because that's the machine learning aspect of it right here, right? So you've actually got FortiNDR learning your network, and that 7 days is default as well. You can shorten that time, or you can do, I think, a maximum of 30 days in an environment. So obviously in larger environments where you might have jobs that are running once a month, you might run a baseline for 30 days because you want to make sure that you detect everything, right, that's going to happen within that month. Okay, so just a couple of FortiNDR new features, I guess. So really, I popped these in just to show how much the product has grown. These features were added in 7.2, right? So the 7.2 major release. And as you can see, quite a bit was added. NetFlow support was added. And we can also do botnet detection from NetFlow as well. The AD device enrichment. So as I mentioned before, trying to give you more visibility into what NDR is seeing. And that's, one way we can do that is by basically replacing an IP address with a host name, because that's going to mean more to you than an IP address. Your public cloud support. So as you can see there, we can actually deploy in most public clouds. Performance improvements. So that's, that just naturally sort of happens with every release, and then other system features as well, right? So the IPv6, I think, was a good one as well. Okay, so now that we've looked at FortiNDR and I guess what FortiNDR does and how it does it, I wanted to sort of deep dive a little bit more into a couple of the engines that basically run within FortiNDR, so specifically around the ANN and the machine learning. So the machine learning is one of the techniques that exists in NDR to pick up or to detect anomalies. And we do this by basically running a baseline of your network. Now, what that means is the baseline is generally run by default for 7 days. You can obviously minimize that, or you can extend it to a maximum of 30 days. Now, how do you determine how long that should run for? I think that just really depends on your environment and how often you have different jobs that might be running or processes that run on the network. So a very simple example would be if you run your baseline for 7 days, but then after that 7 days, every, say, 2 weeks, you have someone that has to RDP to a machine to kick off a process manually. That will get detected as an anomaly because it wasn't detected within the original baseline, right? So really, this is where, as you can see in that third little sentence there, the baseline is around the training. This is how we train FortiNDR to understand your network. And if it doesn't exist in the baseline, FortiNDR is not going to block, but it is going to flag it as an anomaly. And it's at that point that you would then have to go and start to look through those anomalies and say, okay, well, that's legitimate. I know what that is. Or that looks a little bit suspicious. I'm going to investigate that a little bit further. We also have the ability to mute anomalies as well. So go back to that example of the RDP. If it wasn't caught within the original baseline, then that's fine. You can go ahead and mute that anomaly, so therefore it doesn't continually bother you. Just one other thing around the baselining is if you're deploying in a center sensor deployment, meaning that you're going to have a central manager and then multiple sensors, then you can actually create baseline profiles per sensor or per sensor group. Now, the benefit of this is that if you have part of your environment that is that you see as more of a high risk environment for an attacker, so from a perspective that it's going to attract malicious activity, you can actually within the profile you can set a severity level. Now, for that particular environment, you might set the severity level as critical, right? Because you've got to think that anything that's learnt during the baseline, the anomaly needs to be given a severity, just like all of our, just like all your CVEs and everything else out there, effectively gets a severity score or some sort of score. So that's what we're effectively doing. We're giving a severity to any anomaly that's learnt. So in that high risk environment, you might set the severity at critical. So therefore, if something does happen in that environment and it's an anomaly, that you can act on it, from a critical perspective, whatever processes or procedures you have in place for if something critical happens. Whereas the rest of the environment, you might just set that to low, medium, or high, because that's going to be handled by a different sensor. So the machine learning is probably one of the fundamental techniques, right, within NDR to help protect your network, and then also giving you that flexibility to protect high-risk parts of your environment a little differently as well. So that was the machine learning component. Here we'll talk about the advanced malware detection. And this is really around the files that get sent into FortiNDR. Again, I know I spoke about FortiSandbox not so long ago, and obviously FortiSandbox is really around being able to submit URLs, being able to submit files, and if FortiSandbox can't identify those files or URLs in their static engine, it will then push that to the dynamic engine, and then the dynamic engine will actually execute those files or URLs within a contained environment, so that it can actually see if there's anything malicious within those files or wherever that URL is going in the web page. Now, NDR does this slightly differently, where it uses the ANN, the artificial neural network. And basically what we do is, as you can see, we have files that basically come in. We break those files down into individual code blocks, and we basically push those through the ANN, through the neural network. And then within the neural network, that is a pre-trained neural network, which uses custom hardware to accelerate its processing. So as you can see, we've got GPUs in there, so that's why we can push so much through so quickly. And basically, at the end, the file's either going to come out malicious or clean. Okay, so the benefit of this, though, is, as I mentioned before, this is what gives us the ability to do the inline blocking with the FortiGate as well. So by FortiGate AV profile, you can send those files through to FortiNDR to be pushed through the artificial neural network to get a result of either malicious or clean. And the figures are quite high on how many files we can actually push through. It's like 170 per, I can't remember the exact off the top of my head. I'd have to double check, but it's a very high number. All right, so enhanced visibility, a couple of screenshots. You're going to see all this in the demo, so I'm not going to spend too much time going through these screenshots, but you know, as you can see, the amount of information, the way that it's broken down as well, broken down by anomalies and malware graphs, you can see down here in the anomaly overview. At the top there, you can see big data such as devices, anomalies, files analyzed, infected files. There's a separate alerts area. You can see on the dashboard over in the left-hand pane, this is the NDR overview. Oops, I'm so sorry. It's the Apple Magic Mouse working its magic right there. And then at the bottom, like botnets, malware, IOC campaigns, right? You've got all that sort of stuff, different information that's going to basically appear on the dashboard. Now, remember, in sensor deployment, you could have 40 sensors deployed, and all those sensors are going to report all the way back up into the central manager, and this is the dashboard that you will see. So really sort of trying to drive that single pane of glass view for your network. The network insights, again, gets broken down. So we can see we're looking at the network attacks at the moment. And the benefit here is at the top, like the FortiGate or in FortiOS, we're going to give you the graphs that you can filter on very quickly. So as you can see, you can filter on severity, device type, and you know all the other different types of criteria that exists in those widgets. But on top of that as well, you can see all the information that we're actually giving you in the screen as well. So that, you know, starting off with things like the attack name and then source and destination. Again, you'll see this in the demo. This is just a little bit of a glimpse as to what you can see. The email alert settings. So if you did want to receive emails, as you can see, you can actually break that down, and you can get only alerts for very specific attacks that might be seen. So you could just do encrypted attacks, for instance, from an email perspective, and then you might just send all your logs through to a SIEM or FortiAnalyzer or something like that. Right? So a lot of flexibility around the logging and how we push logs out and email as well. Just touching on the automation and efficiency. So I've spoken a lot around the network, a lot around the detection, and I just thought we'd finish off just with the response component. So here, very simply, you can see you've got different types of triggers that exist within NDR. And, you know, basically, if one of those triggers is triggered, obviously from there, we can then, you know, do something from NDR, right? So that might be something like a FortiGate quarantine, or we might actually make use of a third-party webhook that exists within FortiNDR as well. So obviously you've got your triggers, and then you want some form of response. So that response might be, as you can see here, these are the enforcement settings. So here is where you basically create an enforcement profile. And then from here, you then go into the response settings or the response integration, so the automation framework. And as you can see, just from those actions, you've got a FortiGate quarantine, you've got a FortiNAC quarantine, or you've got a generic webhook, right? So an example for the generic webhook might be, you might want to have NDR, I don't know, execute a script or something like that, or, you know, even just basically point straight to ServiceNow and go off and create, say, an incident within ServiceNow, right? Something along those lines. But, you know, as you can see, it's a generic webhook, so you can use that effectively however you want. You can see FortiSwitch is on the roadmap there. So that is coming. I actually think that is in the 7.4 release, I want to say. So that's already out, and we've got our 7.6 release, which is coming out in a month or so. So it'll be the next major release. And compliance and reporting, it's just one slide, but basically, as you can see, we do cover over 90% of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right? So basically looking at all the TTPs that exist within the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So threats, techniques, and procedures, I think it is off the top of my head. But yeah, so we effectively do map a lot of the network intrusions, if any are seen. We will map that back to TTPs within the MITRE ATT&CK framework. You can then also, from the MITRE ATT&CK screen, I think I may show this in the demo, you can actually export a report, which can be exported as a PDF. So telling you a little bit around the attack. It'll show you the TTPs that we used, and all that sort of stuff. With that, I think I'm at time. I'm probably over, so I think we will hand back over to Vinu to start the demo. Thank you very much, everybody.
That you see when you log in. A lot of great information that you can pull off the dashboard. One thing I will say very quickly, the anomaly statistics. Obviously in this environment, the anomalies are very high. That's because demo environment, I'm replaying data. So I'm constantly replaying, malicious PCAPs that we have within the environment. In a normal environment, you should not see such a high rate of anomalies. And if you did, then you'd probably want to be a bit concerned. Let's go straight to network insights. Jump into the device inventory. Device inventory is exactly what it states. It's a device inventory. So anything that NDR is seeing from that sniff traffic, it's going to basically drop in here. So if you flick through, you can see that there's a whole bunch of different devices. What I'm going to do is I'm going to filter directly on vendor, and we're going to grab, say, Schneider Electric, because today is about OT. So just want to show that we can, I'll just do best fit for all columns. We can identify OT devices, right, within NDR. And not only do we identify the devices, but then we also go ahead and use the FortiGuard IoT database to drop them into categories as well, right? So you can see what sort of category they belong to. We're obviously the vendor, the model as well, which we're pulling from the sniff traffic. Now, on here, we can obviously go view device details. There's not a lot happening on these devices because they're effectively just OT devices. It's a device replay. But you can see that if there was any sort of like anomalies, external communications on these devices, that would show up here. So what I'll do now is we'll go back and let's grab a device that I know does have some activity. We'll grab maybe this one. Let's have a look at that. Hopefully this has got a little bit of, yeah, that'll do us, that's fine. So here we can see that, you've got a little bit of outbound traffic, and then all of a sudden here you've got outbound and inbound occurring as well, right? So that could, that might get flagged as an anomaly straight away. If we drop down the bottom here, not only can we see network anomaly traffic, right? We've got all these others, but I'll quickly just take you through a couple here. This is the anomaly type, very important, because not only has the machine learning discovery detected an anomaly, but we've also detected an anomaly based off the network attack intrusion prevention, because we're using the IPS database from FortiOS as well, from FortiGuard Labs, I should say. We can then go to activity. We can see the activity that's been happening on this host. So there's been quite a lot happening. We can look at traffic. So start looking at the layer 7 protocols, so application protocols. Top neighbors, so we can also see who this device has been communicating with. So helping us understand lateral spread, if there was something malicious on here. Any external communication. So you can see here there's been quite a bit of external communication. Obviously in this instance it's just NTP traffic and a little bit of HTTPS. But what we then do is we'll then plot that on a map for you as well, so you can get a quick view of where it's going. So obviously you've got all in the US, but then you've got something over here sitting in the United Kingdom. Is that traffic legitimate or not? It gives you the ability to start to drill down and have a look at that. And the machine learning discovery, really important, because this is the baseline that was actually built. So we can then start looking at, I guess, what were the anomalies on this host as well. And then if there was any malware observed, it will show up in this tab. There may or may not be any on this one. Yep, we can see there is. So here you can see that there was a phishing that was actually detected on this host, right? And that was from the sniffer traffic. We're going to give you the attack chain over here. I'll dive into this in a little bit more detail just in the next section under attack scenario. But you can definitely start getting an idea of what that device inventory is going to give you. You can also jump up the top here. You can change from last 24 hours to 7 days or the last 30 days. And you can change the action. You can also do things like look at the related sessions or related anomalies as well. So again, if you look at, say, related anomaly, if you found phishing, you might then click go and find that this is actually across more than this host. So giving you an idea of the spread of what this might look like. Other things in the network insights, the weak vulnerable communication is a really good one. So as you can see from here, we can see things like weak encryption, weak versions, weak ciphers, authentication types. So this is really going to give you an opportunity to understand, I guess, what is in your environment that is running, anything that needs to be upgraded. And if it's development cycle that you need to do this in, at least you can start to plan for this, when you're refreshing an application or something along those lines. If we grab this one here, weak encryption, and go double click, it'll basically give you the information on what component is weak. So you can see the protocol is SMB. I'm assuming that this is running SMB version 1 or possibly version 2, which is considered a weak cipher. So there you go. So SMB encryption not supported, version 2. So, the recommendation here obviously would be to increase the SMB version or remove SMB entirely and replace it with a different file sharing protocol. So pretty handy. Encrypted attacks, another great one. So we can detect JA3 hashes within the traffic as well. If you're not sure what a JA3 hash is, it's effectively like another fingerprint. And basically it looks at the client hello packet and collects things like the TLS version, the accepted cipher suites, and a few other things. It takes all that, it concatenates it into... It concatenates all those details into a specific order, and then it will generate an MD5 hash. And that effectively is the JA3 fingerprint that you're looking at there. And then we can detect that within your environment as well. All right. So remember, that's encrypted traffic that we're able to detect malicious activity in. Things like top applications, another great one. Starting to sort of see that layer 7. So if you want to sort of just drill down from a layer 7 perspective, you can. And then the ML discovery. This is really your baseline that you're starting to see here. When I spoke about that baseline being created within that first 7 days. And here is where you might see these as anomalies, and you might say, that's not an anomaly, I know it's not, and you can actually add that to an NDR mute rule, which means that it will no longer be deemed an anomaly. An anomaly might be you RDP to a specific machine once a month. And when the baseline was completed, you obviously didn't RDP to that machine, and now you have. And you can then obviously add that to the NDR mute rule so that it will no longer be picked up as an anomaly. All right, let's jump into the attack scenario. Really, the attack scenario is basically a pivoted view of what we were just looking at, but now looking at it from an attack perspective. You can see that we're taking all the different type of attack scenarios, and then we're categorizing those into low, medium, high, or critical. And then from here, if we looked at, say, ransomware, you can see that there's quite a lot, 1,526 counts. We might look at the worm activity because there's only 7, so it'll load a bit quicker for me. But from here, I can click on View Detail, and I can actually have a look at all of the worm activity within my environment. I'll see my victim host IP as well, so it gives me the ability to understand where that where that worm has gone. And if we look down here, I can also see not only the victim IP, but the attacker IP as well. So I know where it's come from. So if this was an attack that was moving laterally in my environment, I might see the attacker IP as an internal host machine. If it's moving laterally, again, it depends on how it's doing that. You can also see things like the worm name, and you can grab the MD5 hash from here as well. You can search FortiGuard Labs. So there's quite a lot of information from here as well. Now, I'm just running very low on time, so we're going to jump down to the security analyst. The express malware analysis, really important one, gives you the ability to submit files. So if you have a file and you're unsure, you can actually click submit file and you can upload the file. Here you can actually see that someone has uploaded the some Indestroyer samples, and you can see the verdict is bad, right? It's red, red means bad. So we know that this file is no good. You can generate a report, PDF report from here, or whatever it might be. Another really handy way to use the express malware analysis is you could have something like ServiceNow submit files to FortiNDR via API, because there's a full REST API that exists within NDR. and then once the verdict is obtained, have that report generated, and you could then have it sent back to ServiceNow so that the person at the other end knows that that file is actually malicious. Something along those lines. The last thing I want to show you very quickly is the outbreak search. This is a very powerful tool that exists within NDR. I'm just going to grab a hash that I grabbed before. So this is a hash that I know is in this environment from the replay data. But an example might be, this could be, say, a 0-day or a new hash that's just been announced. Now you can then grab that hash and you can come in here and you can actually search. We're just going to change that to hash-based. And you can do a search within the environment. Sorry, pasted that into the wrong place, for that hash. And if that is in your environment, you will see that straight away. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of it in here because, as I said, I'm replaying. But you can actually double click on this and you can view the sample data of this particular hash. And as you can see from here, straight away you're getting a lot of information about this hash, how bad it really is, so the different feature types, downloader, dropper, ransomware, banking Trojan. But not only that, you can then start to see where else has this gone within your environment, looking at the victim IP as well. All right, so pretty important one, this one. You can generate a report, pull all the other information from here. And if we just quickly drop back into the outbreak search, you can also, if we were to paste that in again, do another search. Oops, sorry, I forgot to change it to hash-based. Don't know how to use my own product. And with that, that's the end of the demo. So look, thank you so much for watching.
Where to find further details from now if you want to explore FortiNDR. So FortiNDR, as Daniel highlighted, there's two different types of deployment options. So you can look at on-prem. On-prem appliance comes as a hardware appliance, so you can go down a physical appliance, or you can also leverage and look at a VM where you can host it in your public cloud environment. You can also look at the NDR cloud. So this is Fortinet of hosted SaaS platform. There is also a product page on the Fortinet website where you can explore and access more resources, including the data sheet as well as the ordering guide. Some of the next steps that's recommended by our sales team. So if you haven't already done so, please do go back and watch our security operations webinars that's on our Wavelength's YouTube channel. Reach out to one of our account managers, whether it's Fortinet or a Wavelength, and also reach out and chat to us so we can further help you in solving your customer needs. Lastly, familiarize yourself with the FortiNDR webpage, data sheets, ordering guides to look at what's more suitable for you. If you need a demo, reach out to us and we can help you in that aspect as well. And then lastly, develop and sell a converged Fortinet security platform that can integrate it into security fabric and provide you that centralized visibility. That's pretty much all we got for today. Thank you so much for joining this webinar, and I truly hope you've learned something new and this can further enhance your security posture. Thanks all. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.